The March roster for the Nations League has been released, and interim coach Anthony Hudson has called in 24 players for the U.S. men's national team. There's one big injury that is coming out that is going to lead one of our most critical players away from the squad, and we'll update you on everything that you need to know about the players that were called in, including some exclusive information on Fuller and Balogun that we got in the press conference after the roster release. These are the first competitive matches since the 2022 World Cup, and it does look like we have called in the most talented squad we possibly could, bar a few names that have been left out. So let's talk about who is in, who is out, and the overall thoughts on the Nations League coming up later in March. I think one of the best things that you can do as a federation is reward players that are in good form for their club. And we have done that in spades. One of the reasons that you do this is for a national team, you're really looking to squeeze out the best that you can in the short amount of time that you have these players. And you're not necessarily looking to improve the skill or the play throughout the camp like you are with a club team. So for a national team, it is very important that you call in players that are in good form already. And we see that with players like Brian Reynolds, who currently on loan from Roma at Westerlo in the Belgian First Division, is one of the best fullbacks performing in the division right now, and he does deserve a call-up for this national team. Miles Robinson also makes it back into the squad after almost a year out with an injury that did keep him out for the World Cup as well. Now, one interesting note is that Miles Robinson is the only MLS player on this squad, so MLS stands are currently in the mud. But Anthony Hudson, in the press conference after the roster release, did talk about how in the summer with the programming that the national team has in the Gold Cup, they are looking to give European-based players rests and bring in more MLS-based players. Also, we don't see players like Walker Zimmerman or Kellen Acosta in this roster. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Major League Soccer is not taking a break for this international window, so that could also explain why there's only one MLS player on this roster. I also want to highlight two attacking midfielders that have made this roster. Alan Signora is back on this roster. Even though he didn't perform incredibly well in January, it's nice to see him back. And that January camp was really coming up to when Alan Signora hadn't really played competitively for the last 4 months. So I'm happy to see him again. And then Taylor Booth, he's only been with the national team for one other camp, but did not make his senior team debut. He is one of the best players for Utrecht right now in the Netherlands, and he's gotten on the radar of Champions League clubs like Ajax coming up to the next transfer window. Elie Zendejas commits to the U.S. men's national team and makes this roster. He also becomes part of an honored club of players that are playing for the U.S. national team while plying their trade at a club in Liga MX. Now, make no mistake that his talent will raise the floor of this team, but I don't necessarily think it will raise the ceiling, as I still put Timothy Weah, Gio Reyna, and Christian Pulisic above him. Speaking of Gio Reyna, his parents are currently embroiled in unnecessary drama and pretty disgusting behavior. I'll have a video out on that this weekend. I was supposed to get it out today, but the roster released, so we're going to hold that for the weekend. But Gio Reyna, it's nice to see that he is back on this squad, and because of sporting reasons, he'll be back here. He has put this situation behind him. He's tried to get right in his head, and it's nice to see that the Federation isn't taking anything out from his parents' behavior on Gio Reyna. Now, who is out? Because we actually see one of our most important players not on this roster. Tyler Adams just came up with a hamstring injury from Leeds United and will not be joining this roster. I think one of the positives that you might be able to take from this situation is that it was pretty obvious in the World Cup that we needed to find a backup number 6 for Adams, and not having him in this camp does leave that roster spot wide open. So is it Johnny Cardoso? Is it Luca De La Torre, even with Weston McKennie playing more of the 6 and sharing responsibilities? We'll see in this camp, but I'm excited to see who can take that backup 6. Now we have to get into our center back situation because Cameron Carter-Vickers is not here. He is one of the best players and will likely make the best 11 team in Scotland. He's also on the radar of Premier League clubs being sold back this summer. So one of the best players for one of the best teams in Scotland has not made this roster. Cameron Carter-Vickers is not with this team. That we have Chris Richards, who is still trying to work his way back into the Crystal Palace starting 11. And that's probably why he wasn't taken here, because we had other center backs available to us. Also, call out to Austin Trusty, who has been crushing it at Birmingham City this year. He gets called in, and I think that is at the expense of Chris Richards, who we probably left him at Crystal Palace to continue to work his way back into the squad. Again, Walker Zimmerman, one of the stalwarts of this team, is not with the U.S. men's national team. I think mostly because his club team will have competitive matches in Major League Soccer throughout this time. And it was way more important to get Miles Robinson back with the U.S. squad rather than Walker Zimmerman, who has been with this squad throughout. Now, I also want to quickly mention that I had dreams of grandeur that Fuller and Balogun would commit to the U.S. men's national team and be on this March roster, but it doesn't look to be this one yet. Now, Anthony Hudson, in the press conference after the roster released, was asked about this by the mustachioed man, Tom Bogert from MLSsoccer.com, and Hudson actually gave a response that Fuller Balogun and his entourage are in constant communication, open dialogue with the U.S. men's national team about committing his future. Also, just take this for what it is, but Anthony Hudson started the conversation by calling Fuller and Balogun Flo. So if we're on nickname, first name basis, talks have to be a little bit advanced, don't you think? The last person that I want to give a shout out to that didn't make this roster is Kevin Paredes. And he is someone that I think is deserving, but probably right on the cusp. And the comments from Hudson after the roster was released kind of validated this fact, said that he was right on the cusp of making this roster. And because of all the U20 matches, the U.S. men's national team matches, the Gold Cup matches, Paredes will get his shot later down the road, but it just wasn't meant to be for this roster. The only other person that I can think of that really missed out here is Gaga Slonina, although he hasn't really been getting playing time at Chelsea. And we see our championship caliber goalkeepers in Zach Steffen and Ethan Horvath honestly crushing it in the league. And they have both of those clubs, Middlesbrough and Luton, are in the promotion playoff. Matt Turner has to be still the number one, backing up Arsenal's keeper Aaron Ramsdale, who will likely go on to win the Premier League this season. So Kevin Paredes and Gaga Slonina are probably the last out for me, and our center back core has quickly become one of our biggest depth pieces. Overall, though, these games should be pretty much a cakewalk, and I know that nothing in CONCACAF is ever easy, but these 24 names should easily get us past Granada away and El Salvador at home. MLS players are still going to be with their clubs. Miles Robinson, it's going to be amazing to see him back. And really, outside of the injuries and some of the center backs, these are the best 24 players that we could have possibly called. I was personally a little bit worried that we might not have seen the absolute best out of these players or out of this roster going into a Nations League tournament, but really for a group stage against an inferior opponent in Granada and someone that we will have to try against in El Salvador, I am happy to see that we called in the best possible players available. Guys, tell me what you think down below in the comments, and thank you for sticking with me as I took the last 3 weeks break. As my son was born and I got to spend a ton of time with him, and I'm still spending lots of time with him, I still have a few more weeks before I go back to my full-time job, so expect more coverage on the Nations League. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you are happy to see me back, because I am happy to see you guys back here as well. I'll be reading all the comments, responding to everything as always. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more U.S. men's national team content. Like the video so more people can find it. I will see you next time on It's Called Soccer. Peace.